Sindh Rural Support Organization, PPF, etc. have been doing. So I would start by giving an introduction of our distinguished guests here. So first of all, we have with us Captain Syed Ahmed Nawasa, who is the Additional Secretary of Poverty Alleviation and Social Safety Division. Then we have Mr. Rashid Bajwa. Rashid Saab is the CEO of National Rural Support Program. Then we have Mr. Dittal Kalhoro, who is also the CEO of Sindh Rural Support Organization. Then we have Ms. Samia Liaquat Ali Khan, who is working as Senior Group Head, Graduation Group with the Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. Then we have Syed Muhammad Mustafa, who is Technical Advisor, Social Protection with GIZ Pakistan. And then we have Mr. Fida Muhammad, who is Country Program Officer at the International Fund for Agriculture Development. So we will be starting with an introductory remarks by the chair. So I would request the Captain Saab to start with a few remarks regarding this session and what is the purpose of this session, what we are expecting from this session. Over to you, Captain Saab.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable guest panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and a very warm good morning. It's a great privilege and honor for me to be in the company of academics, professionals, and practitioners of poverty alleviation. Ladies and gentlemen, the mission, objectives, and ultimate and outcome of social protection and poverty alleviation efforts is to get people out of poverty trap, enable them to sustain themselves, especially enable those who can eventually become self-sufficient, self-supporting, and that's called graduation in the terminology of social protection programs. This is consequence of continued upgradation of social protection systems, policies, strategies, and programs. Conventional social assistance used to help the poor to survive the shocks, risks, and catastrophes. But graduation approach supports the poorest of the households to achieve sustained income and move out of extreme poverty. Program with BISP as its flagship initiative, Punjab Social Protection Agency and others recently adopted the graduation strategies. Initially, all started up with social assistance programs. Social protection paradigm in Pakistan remains mainly characterized by transfers for the purpose of consumption, sustain the risks and shocks. And Pakistan keeps on following social issuance model, which is designed to protect the poor against temporary risks and income shocks. So it's heavily skewed towards social assistance models, partially because they're easy to design, implement, monitor, evaluate, and finally close. To date, to suggest that the present anti-poverty programs in Pakistan are fulfilling the key objective or the ultimate end objective of social protection, which is poverty alleviation. Social protection in Pakistan therefore needs to move towards graduation strategies. This is quite evident as far evidence till date suggests. lessons from small private sector graduation programs can support and guide the government in designing its anti-poverty graduation interventions that include strategies, programs, and projects. The seminal work in the field of poverty alleviation was initiated by Aga Khan Rural Support Program, Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund, Rural Support, the Rural RSPN, Rural Support Programs Network, and Akhuvat. Akhuvat has the distinction of starting with interest-free loans. And they all have been working for lifting the poor out of poverty since decades and have substantial experience in lifting people out of poverty. This session obviously is an endeavor to learn lessons from experts and practitioners for informed policy choices to reform public sector social protection strategy and programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Sayed Saab. So moving on, I would request Mr. Syed Muhammad Mustafa to please set the context and give some introductory remarks on what is the graduation, why it is important, and what to expect from the discussion here. Over to you, Syed Muhammad Mustafa Saab.
Thank you so much, Kashif Saab. I'm just going to, I'd like to share my screen, but I don't have permission presently. So if that could be enabled.
Sajid Saab, please see.
Otherwise, I'd sent a presentation yesterday. If you can display it, I can also do that.
Mustafa sir, you can share screen from your side. I'm giving you screen share rights, please.
Thank you.
Mustafa sir, this is done. You can share screen from your laptop.
So please let me know when you have visibility.
We can see your slides. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much. So social protection and graduation. During a recent exercise with the government of KPK and the Public Policy and Social Protection Reforms Unit, we undertook an analysis of over 25 definitions of social protection, and almost all of them state poverty alleviation and mitigation as a primary objective. When we see the landscape in Pakistan, we see that there is a number of programs, an entire magnitude of government intervention that is happening. We have social assistance with the form of Benazir Income Support Program, Zakat and Ushur, and of course, now increasingly after 2015, provincial cash transfer programs. We also have Sehat Sahulat program, which is again, even though it is an insurance-based model, because it is not contributory, it would be classified as social assistance. Then we have insurance, public sector pensions and employees old age security institution, ESSI, a number of programs. Well, labor market programs seem to not be quite very many. We do have microfinance programs and skill development programs, but we don't seem to have any public works programs or programs which are directly linking people to the labor market. When we see the trends of poverty in Pakistan, they have been going down since 2001. And this happened till 2016, where in all provinces of the country, we saw a decrease in poverty, and that was the overall trend. This trend was, of course, also accompanied by an increase in GDP, real GDP. However, then we had the COVID-19 shock, which resulted in a significant number of people losing their jobs. I think on the whole, the government of Pakistan's strategy of micro lockdowns and the SR's cash transfer was appreciated internationally. However, we still see that according to the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, a sizable number of people, at least in the millions, are still out of the job market. We also know that a significant number of people have reduced their incomes. And social assistance can, of course, help us in coping as an immediate shock. However, there does come a time, and as the IMF put it in one of their reports for COVID-19, that if we really want to recover from COVID, the way to do that would be to get our populations which have been enrolled into social assistance programs back into the labor market. And that is where, for us, it presents an interesting challenge because we have a very strong social assistance program, and we would, of course, have to develop strategies of how to link these people, graduate them out of the program or out of poverty. And that is also a distinction that is there. The current situation is that Pakistan faces considerable fiscal constraints. The present system is very reliant on social assistance, and topics including productive inclusion, livelihoods, graduation are gaining increasing traction and increasing importance. So this session is about how can we actually graduate people out of programs and out of poverty, and what actually works and what doesn't. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mustafa Saab. So moving on to our next session, which is first round of introduction to each of our partner panelists organizations work related to graduation and poverty alleviation. So we would be interested to know from each of these organizations that what has been their key projects or interventions for poverty alleviation and graduation. What is their conceptualization of poverty alleviation and graduation? What are they trying to achieve through these models or approaches? And what have been the successes? What have been the failures? What has really driven those successes? So something that can help us know their models and approaches. And if we want to copy or adopt their models, what should be the key lessons that we should be keep in mind that, okay, this is what helps us achieve the goals, and these are the challenges that we should keep in mind to handle. So starting with the first of all from Mr. Rashid Bajwa, who is the CEO of National Rural Support Program. So, sir, I would invite you to share your experience and the key lessons learned.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you very much to have invited me over for a discussion. Let me start by clarifying this myth about the difference between social protection and poverty alleviation. Social protection is a set of policies which reduce vulnerability, diminish people's exposure to risk, and enhance their capacity to protect themselves. But at the same time, if you look at poverty alleviation, it is a set of measures, both economic and humanitarian, that are intended to permanently lift people out of poverty. So this permanence is very important in the context of our country. Now, the question is that how do we measure poverty then if you have to do that? I mean, we know that we have this poverty scorecard with the BISP, but if you look at the history, you will see that we started measuring poverty since the 1980s when we had the Household Income Expenditure Survey, the HIES, through the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics. And the first thing we did was that they started what we call the food energy index. And they had this 2,350 calorie basket, and people falling below that was considered poor. And it became quite popular. And as was said earlier, that as a result, the measurement, which we call as a result of this food energy index, was the headcount ratio. And headcount ratio obviously decreased. But that became a problem because then Pakistan was about to go into a middle income country, and we would have lost a lot of donor funding. So then the government looked at it, and then they started in 2013 and 14, I guess, the Planning Commission adopted what they call the cost of basic needs, the CBN methodology. And at that, they estimated that the poverty line for this period was about 3,030 rupees. And so this was another way of measuring poverty. But then in 2016, the government of Pakistan adopted the global index of poverty, which is the multi-dimensional poverty index. Now, multi-dimensional means that it is headcount ratio, which means income poverty, plus access to education, health, and living standards. So this is now the basic multi-dimensional poverty index. And as a result, in the MPI, Pakistan, 38.8% people are poor. So I thought that this was very important that we clarify what do we mean by it. The other very important area is that 70% of our population, which is 140 million, is rural. So rural poverty versus urban poverty is very important to disintegrate these into two, because the measurements, the measures which we take for rural poverty perhaps might be different from what we do in the urban poverty. The problem at the moment, what we see post-COVID, is basically the phenomena of urban poverty more than the rural poverty, because of the government of Pakistan's support price increase. As a result, pumping in billions of rupees into the rural financial markets. So that has happened. Now, I'm very glad to know from Captain Saab that the promise of graduation program is economic inclusion, and the objectives of social protection at the end of the day is poverty alleviation. But as I said, we need to distinguish them, both of them. Now, what are the measures which need to be done? First of all, I must also clarify that microcredit is not a panacea. Whether it is interest-free or whether with interest, it doesn't matter. And this was demonstrated by Mr. Duflo, and he got a Nobel Prize last year on economics. And he wrote a book on which he called The Poor Economics. And what they did was that they did a panel data for 15 years, where they looked at it, that microcredit recipients, what do they do with the money which they receive in microcredit? Yes, it smoothens the incomes. It is basically, it is looked by the client as a savings instrument rather than an investment instrument. And what he's saying is, both Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee, the professors at MIT, that what happens is that the money which is given is not used for investment in the business, the micro business. It is used for other purposes, and the business actually provides the installment from which they return the money. So basically, we need to do some additional. I'm not saying that microcredit is not good, it is not effective. We are doing microcredit for the last 30 years. But I just wanted to clarify that it is not a panacea. It does help, but this is not enough. So then what is enough? One is, if you look at the headcount ratio, the income poverty, then we need to do what is being done by IFAD and PPF, the National Poverty Graduation Program. I'm not going to take away the thunder from the other speakers, both Samia and our friend Fida, when they will talk about it. But the fact of the matter is that you need to do what they are doing in terms of asset creations, and then intangible assets, which means skills training and others. But this is also one part of it. If we do microcredit, asset transfers, skills, and all the inputs which they are doing, this will sort one part of the problem. But the next problem of what I said in the multi-dimensional poverty, the access to services, education, health, these are very important areas which are being ignored at the moment. So unless and until we do that, we will remain at about 38% poverty, irrespective of whether we have COVID or we have a second wave of COVID or not. In addition, we need to look at it that this country is in a spiral of problems, and the problem is because of the balance of payments. And one of the biggest, money guzzler which is happening is that we have started importing food stuffs and agriculture products. So I was looking at it that just last year, the bill by the government of Pakistan for import of edible oil, wheat, sugar, and cotton is more than $8 billion. This is actually the difference, the balance of payment difference which we have in the country. So imagine if we look at the agriculture and the rural sector, focus on that. I know it's very easy to say than to do, but if we are able to do that, we have demonstrated in one of our projects which we are doing in Hyderabad, where we have a strategy where we have been able to increase the production of rice and wheat by 30%. Increase through third-party verification. Ernst & Young came and they did a third-party valuation, brought in that 30% increase in incomes of the poor farmers. So you can see that within 3 to 5 years, there is now a living strategy happening. And this living strategy is there to be seen, that you can increase the agriculture productivity. We are almost 50% less than what the Indian Punjab is sowing and getting just across the border. And remember, it's a man-made border. Same people, same water, same everything. And so if they can do that, I think we can do that as well. The government has to look at it. Finally, I think what the ministry, past division, or whoever is interested should take an account of all the activities which are being done, create a group of people who will then document all these new things which are happening, collect them together, and based on that, make a policy. So you need somebody who is a public policy person, or a group of people who are experts in public policy, bring them together, ask them to go and look at all the activities which are being done, take them onto the table, do a series of roundtables, maybe at the level of Planning Commission or at the level of Ministry of Finance and the past division, of course, and then come up with a recipe. In the last 30 years, which I have been associated with myself, I think there is no book, there is no textbook on how to reduce poverty. But to me, I think what we have learned over these 30 years and everybody else who is here on the table, we can collectively come up with clear-cut strategies. And lastly, it is not an investment. I think the money which the government of Pakistan is using through the BISP to support the social protection programs, this is huge. And obviously the taxpayer is paying this money. And it is very important that we bring these people out of poverty. It has been a while now, more than 10 years, that they are getting these scholarships, these doles, as I call it. And we have to come out of it sooner than later. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, but I have given you what can be done in the next steps. Bahut bahut shukriya.
Thank you, Rashid Saab. And I think these were very good insights into the macroeconomic side of the poverty alleviation as well, where our macroeconomic realities are right now hampering our poverty alleviation efforts. So moving on to the next speaker, Mr. Muhammad Dittal Kalhoro, I would request you to share your experiences with us, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. This is a privilege for me to be here in such together such panelists, especially Dr. Bhajwa and Samia, the most senior. I have been in SRSO in a development sector since last 6-7 years. So definitely my experience is a bit lower than, but I personally feel the experience of the poverty. So I understand in that context much about the poverty. So basically, poverty is Dr. Rashid Baju also explained that in urban and rural areas, poverty dynamics are different. Mostly in urban area, poverty, the reasons of poverty are unemployment. If any family got the employment, definitely he sustain or come out of the poverty. But in rural areas, the poverty are because of the lack of the assets. As we all know, in rural areas, there are three main components, like the agriculture, livestock, and unskilled labor. So this to reduce the poverty, I think is it need a package. We all understand that poverty, again, Dr. Saab briefed that poverty is a multiple indicators. Like beside income, there should be linked also linked with education, health, and living standards. So we RSPs are working, the social protection are all the developments, NGO sectors and the government are working on the incomes of the people and thinking that after getting the incomes, they will access to the health and education. But we experience since, in particular in Sindh, the super flood in 2009, these are the very huge shocks. What we started, and soon after starting the program, these floods came in, especially in Shikarpur, Kashmir, and Jakamba. So the benefits basically of the micro interest-free loans were eroded in those shocks. Then the rain in 2011 and rain again 2014, covering 4-5 districts, and then the COVID. So basically, the shocks are bigger as compared to the investments made in these communities. So I think beside income generation activities, we should think on the complete package of education and health. Somehow I'm talking about the Sindh experience that health facilities are our health interventions are much better as compared to the education. But the education is the I have no any reservation to share that education of Sindh compared to other provinces is the worst at the moment. So I think the government's role are bigger, especially the policy making for these poverty alleviation. To intervention with these households, though we have experience, even third-party experience, third-party verification that the income of these households after the interventions is RSP's approach is basically to support the governments, either provincial governments or the federal governments, like the NRSP represent the federal government and the SRSO closely work together with the government of Sindh. And government of Sindh, they have we are thankful to the government of Sindh that they have invested a lot in community institutions. They support the RSP approach that people should be organized. So when the people are organized, they have a better access to the delivery of the services of the governments. So recently, I think the PPF came with a brilliant idea of the graduation. Is we were providing similar loans, like even a grant of 10,000 or 12,000 rupees, and then interest-free loans of 15,000 to 14,000 average. And the people, the household invested in a micro or very nano, like purchasing a goat. Then they, after 1 year, they sell the goat and saving of 5,000 to 10,000 rupees and return the amount of 15,000. Then in second cycle, they purchase a two goats or a bigger goat of investment of around 25,000, because the saving and again 15,000 rupees. So this requires 5 to 6 cycles of CIF to reach at a sustainable or 60-70,000 livestock or a business or a shop. So PPF through SAS project, IFAD funding and Government of Pakistan, they are providing a higher amount as a grant. It's not a loan, it's a grant to those beneficiary. And in the first year, we come across through internal monitoring, we see a very good results that in just in a 1 year, almost 80% graduate not outcome out of poverty, but those who have a score of as a per poverty score card 5 or 6, they go in a